Hey, Team Quebec, it's me, of course. I just wanted to share a few words that I received this morning from the Lord about Canada and the province, and hopefully it'll be like a word of exhortation. Anyhow, so just to keep this short, I'll get right to it. So in Ezekiel, chapter 22, Ezekiel's been all over the place. A lot of people have been speaking about Ezekiel lately. Um, and in verse 30, he says, I looked for someone who might rebuild the wall of righteousness that guards the land. I searched for someone to stand in the gap in the wall so I wouldn't have to destroy the land, but I found no one. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about there's two really important elements to this verse. One is that God was looking for someone to rebuild the wall, and then he was looking for someone to stand in the gap. And so I started to think, you know, around our families, our cities, our provinces, territories, around the nation, there are walls. And those walls have been trodden down. And because of that, the walls of righteousness I'm talking about, they used to protect the land, they've been trodden down. And because of that, evil has been allowed into our various spheres, bringing contamination with it and harming the people that are in those spheres. And so it's like God was looking and is looking for people to rebuild the walls of righteousness around those spheres to protect the people inside and to keep evil out. And when anyway, going back to the original verse, when he didn't find anybody who was doing that, he was looking for somebody to stand in the gap in the wall, meaning someone that could stand there as a watchman, as a sentinel, but also as a protector. Because obviously, if you're standing there and you see a lion or something trying to get into the city, you will defend the city. And again, he found no one. And then I think back to our situation today. The walls of righteousness have been downtrodden, evil is coming into the country, and God is still looking for people. If nobody's rebuilding the wall, he's looking for people to stand in the gap to protect and defend the city. And then I was thinking, there are people who are praying. We've been praying, other people have been praying and fasting. There's organizations that have 24-hour prayer going on for Canada. And I was just like, why are things still the way that they are? Why don't things seem to be getting any better? And I don't have the answer for that. I mean, I'm sure there's more than one answer. One thing that I do sense is that even though things might look dark and frustrating right now, I think the fact that there are people praying is what's actually keeping things at this point. That if people were not praying as we had been praying, things would be a lot worse. And so I that's the sense that I feel, and I think that's a point that we have to remember, that maybe things aren't the way that we want them to be. Things could be a lot worse, and I think it is because the saints are rising up and the saints are praying. But the other thing is, I think it's also a reminder that this is a continual battle. Praying once, praying twice, praying three times is not enough. Everything in the Christian life is ongoing. The only thing that's permanent is Christ's salvation, but every other aspect of Christianity that we or the Christian life is an ongoing process. We're called to continually pray. We're called to keep going to the Lord, to keep bringing things to Him, to not give up, to persevere, and all that kind of stuff. And so, I guess my point is that, one, not to give up, not to lose hope, not to give in to discouragement. I think that's definitely one of the tools of the enemy to cause us to stop praying, so that we start complaining, and so that we start focusing on what's wrong instead of God's grace and God's goodness and the things that He does do. And there's a lot of things that He's doing behind the scenes that we don't see and we just take for granted. And I think, He tells us to set our minds on things above, to focus on things that are good, to be thankful in all things. And I think that's the way that we need to protect our hearts and guard our hearts against discouragement and losing focus. But the other thing is, it's also part of, God's process of refining us and testing us, to not give up and to keep praying and to keep trusting that regardless of what we see, regardless of what's happening in the news, to remember that God is in control. He's still on His throne, and that our call is to pray. Our call is to keep lifting up our nations, our cities, our families, to keep standing in the gap and to do our best to live righteously and to act righteously to rebuild that wall of righteousness around our various spheres. So anyhow, I just wanted to just share that this morning. Hopefully it's something that will encourage people to keep praying. As for our regular prayer groups, I have no idea when the next one is going to be. As you've seen, there's a lot of things that are going on right now that I'm doing. So we may have a meeting in July. I don't know. Maybe it'll pick up again in September, or maybe it'll take a different form. I have no clue. So anyhow, I just wanted to just pass that along. I hope that it will bless somebody this morning, and just pray for God's blessing on you. Take care. God bless.